Okay, thank you very much, Tom, and thanks a lot for having us here today. And we try to do this a bit as a conversation. So we start have alternating images and use them as a starting point for the conversation. So yeah, looking at this image here, that's from your Australia series. But maybe even going back a bit further than that, like just wanted to, I always find it intriguing to know how people started their photography journey. So maybe you can enlighten us a bit about when you took your first image and why, and what made you become a photographer, and where's the passion and the interest, in your work?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think like a lot of people, or similar stories that I've heard, how people start photography is through like a photography course at school, and I took photography in high school and totally just kind of fell in love with that process and working in the darkroom and all of that kind of thing, but didn't really see it as a way to kind of a thing to pursue, or a thing that I could see myself doing as a job or anything like that. So it was just something I was interested in. Fast forward, I'll make a long story really short, but I spent a lot of my 20s just kind of trying to work out what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do, and was very kind of drawn to image making, and end up taking a course in screen and film, and at the same time working as a location scout for like film, television commercials and that type of thing. And then for that job, I was required...
Where did you do the studies?
In Sydney. It was just a TAFE course in Sydney, and then I was working in Sydney as a location scout. And for that job, I was required to buy my own stills camera. And then I moved to Melbourne, and I was doing lots of kind of film work and making music videos and things like that. And I think I was just craving something that I could not really rely on a team, and something that I could pick up and pursue on my own, and just have something a little bit more immediate. And I had quite a few friends who were also kind of working in photography and stills and that type of thing, and it just kind of like resonated with me more than working with film and like video I'm talking about, I think. And yeah, so I just but from there it took a long time for me to work out how I was going to make this work for me, and how I wanted to pursue it.
And this being part of the Australia series, when did you start that, and what made you start that?
This work was... I might just lift this a little, sorry, just because I'm like leaning down. I'm finding it hard. Oh. That's better. Yeah, so this series of work was quite, integral in my journey as a photographer, because I think before I started on this body of work, I really had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't know, I knew I loved taking photos, and I knew it was the path that I wanted to pursue, but I hadn't really found my voice as a photographer. And it was in 2014 when I was pregnant with my son, and we were taking a road trip up from Melbourne up to my hometown in Lismore for Christmas, and we were kind of stopping along the way, and I just started taking some self-portraits of myself in these kind of caravan parks, and I was really kind of drawn to that Australian kind of like suburban kind of like desolate kind of landscapes, and I when I started taking the photos, there were just these, like I said, these self-portraits, and then I realised that I was kind of wondering why I was like drawn to these type of scenes and then it just kept expanding and kind of revealing itself to me because I was heading back to my hometown. I was pregnant at the time, and I think it was just this like part of my adolescence and part of my youth and part of my growing up in this small town that was appealing to me, and it felt like it resonated with me. And it was the first time that I was really making work that really kind of resonated, which it just felt different because I was just, you know, I think a lot of photographers can probably recognise when you're making work that doesn't. and I think when things are coming together and you're actually creating work from a true voice or a true part of yourself, it just felt exciting to me. So I just, it's been a really long process. It's been about 8 years now. And yeah, instead of kind of using self-portraits, I was wondering how I can kind of keep making this kind of work. And yeah, so I just started kind of staging the scenes and you know, getting people to kind of sit in on these scenes and creating them and kind of constructing these scenarios all based on my adolescence growing up in a kind of a small suburban setting. Yeah. That was a... yeah. No, this is like, it started as a self-portrait series, and then I realised that was very limiting. And I needed to kind of expand, and yeah.
But as you mentioned, so these are constructed scenes pretty much sort of from your memory while growing up, and set in modern times, or in like not modern times, but in the now.
Yeah, I think I was just kind of the way that it all came about was me just kind of thinking of work that I wanted to create, and I kept kind of revisiting my adolescence because it was like the one thing that I was like trying to think about scenarios and scenes and the kind of work that I wanted to be making, and I just kept going back to my hometown, and then I was thinking about why I was interested in making these kinds of works, and then it just kind of kept revealing and expanding itself. And it's been challenging because it's, you know, it's like a series that I've learnt so much about photography through. Like as I'm making it and sharing it and putting it out into the world, I'm still learning about what I'm doing. And so in a lot of ways it feels unresolved. And yeah, I'm still working through this series, and it just.
Are you also still working on the series, or is it do you regard that as finished? Or?
No, it's not. I'm about to start working with a mentor to kind of resolve this body of work, and I actually submitted it into the Stories Award. Was it 2 years ago?
His photo's done its rounds on Photo Collective.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, but it's like for anyone who is familiar with the series, there is a lot of these very like kind of secular frames of these kind of intense scenes, and after I submitted it to the awards, Matt Abbott, you know, got in contact with me, and he was like, you know, would you like some feedback on, you know, and I was like, sure. And he said, have you thought about having some quieter scenes in the work? And I had thought about it, but I just kind of threw it out because I was like, no, I've started this, I've got to continue in this way of working for the consistency and the visual language. But after kind of having a chat to him, it was something that I've really kind of opened up to. So I think that's the way that I'm moving forward with this series is kind of having some quieter moments and some breathing space in between these scenes. I think I've made up a lot of mock books, and every time I look through it, I feel like claustrophobic. Like I need to I don't know.
Or sometimes it's
breathe it
good to have a bit of time between taking the image and then maybe showing it or publishing it and let it sit a bit, and you look at it in a different way as well after a couple of years or something like that.
Yeah.
Like when I go back to images I took like 10 or 15 years ago, you look at them with a different eye,
Yeah.
and because you are in a different position and you were in a different position back then. So.
Totally.
And sometimes it's images you have overlooked and which you think, oh wow, that's actually not that bad, so might use that instead or additionally.
It's happened a million times when I've looked back through like what I would consider B-sides or like things that were not, and I'm like, oh, actually, because as you keep going, you're just growing and changing and you're influenced by different things, and that's why I think it's so hard sometimes to recognize when a project is completed, but I'm ready.
It's hard to say it's finished,
I'm ready to wrap this up, but yeah.
And is the next one, is that the Australia?
No, this is you.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I get to the Australia one then a bit later.
First of all, I just wanted to say how much I love your work. No, we had to choose, we were asked to choose 5 images each, and I had a really
Of the other person.
Of the other person to talk about, and I emailed Tom and I was like, I've got 17.
Which is my favorite number. It is,
no, just kind of captivated by every single kind of body of work that you've got on your website.
You don't have to say that.
Yeah. Anyway, I will move on. This is from your series Farewells 665. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm really kind of interested in how this body of work and this way of working came about, and if you can just tell us about the process that you used to kind of create the image.
So it goes all the way back to 1998. In Germany, in Munich, when I finished my studies in 1998, I thought about I would like to have an ongoing project, and I always loved portrait photography, and I did experiment with large format portrait photography, and so I was looking for a way to structure that as a series, and I did start taking portraits of friends and people I meet in a studio setting, but then one day I was doing a job with friends in a factory. They produced doorknobs, and we had to take photos of them in a studio and on film, and then develop the film. And it was so boring because we were 3 people. One was on the machine developing the transparencies, and I was working with a friend. We just finished our studies, so that was our first job coming out of photo school. One put the doorknob down, the other one pushed the button, and then the next one, and it was like thousands of them. And so you do it, but you think about all sorts of other stuff at the same time. And then I have done these large format portraits outdoor, but the idea I had there in this factory was to take a portrait of somebody, then leave the camera on the tripod and do a second exposure after the person walked out of the frame. And then you end up with 2 negatives, large format, which is one of the person and one of the background where the person was. And the idea was that I always wanted to sort of involve the person being photographed a bit more in the process. And the idea was that I give that person the background negative, and they can scratch something into the negative. The scratching bit, I love Robert Frank's work, and he scratched and let people scratch and into the negative. And when I did my apprenticeship before I studied, I was never allowed to touch the negative. There was always this holy thing, like the negative, you dry it, don't get any fingers on there, and put it in the sleeve, and be careful. And oh my God, you put your finger on there. There's a stamp or what, like your from your finger. So I I really wanted that person to get their fingers, their hands on the negative and do whatever they want with it, And I have this leather awl, which is like basically a handle with a needle, and they can scratch into that. I got that from a flea market in Germany once. And ever since, so I had that since the 90s, late 90s, that leather awl, and I still have it, and people still use it. And there's paint. I did a project in the Western Desert with Madu artists, and they paint, and then the fingers are full of paint, and they use the awl, and so that paint is on that awl as well. So it's a sort of this relic, and it reminds me of all the different people who used it. And but coming back to that idea, it was about involving the person, giving the person being photographed the opportunity to be actively involved in the image-making process 50-50, So there's the portrait. They see that because it's a Polaroid. 665, that's why it's called Farewell 665, because in 2007, Polaroid went bankrupt and they stopped the production, and that was the last year they made that film. And since then, I'm using basically leftover stock, and sometimes I still can buy some from America or Japan or Europe on eBay, but it's really expensive. It used to be $30 for 10 exposures, so $3 per pop, and now you pay 150 US for a pack, and then you don't even know if it still works, because sometimes the chemicals dry out. And I did a project this year in the Kimberley, and I probably burned around $800-900 of film because it didn't work anymore. So then it's like throwing money out of the window. Anyway, so yeah, that is the little story how like this was the best thing which came out of this doorknob photography job. And since then I've been doing these, so since 1998. And if Polaroid would still produce them, I probably would do them as long as I live, because I find it always very interesting. You meet people, even if a person has done one before and 10 years later they do another one, they look different, they are different time in their life, there are different things important to them, they react, they do something different, they write something different, and it's always intriguing what people do with it, There was a friend of mine, she's an artist, and she's a jeweler. She got the negative, and she took her hands, her fingernails, and scratched, like that was her thing to do with this, So, and then there's other people who they spend half an hour or an hour painting something into it. There's other people who just write like a couple of words. So it's always different, it's always new, and it's always intriguing. I always love doing them. So it's a bit like a visual diary as well, who you meet, where you've been, and obviously, everybody changes. So it sort of brings me back looking at the images to the time when I took them and where I was and what sort of state I was in my life and in my photography work and stuff like that. So it's a lot of different things, and some, but it's always started as a personal project since then, and I call it the open series. So basically, people can do whatever they want with it, and then over the years, I did projects where I asked people about specific things. For example, we went to Wittenum, the former asbestos mining town in the Pilbara. I went there with a friend of mine. She's a filmmaker, and she did a film about the last 8 residents there. Now it's closed, so they evicted the last person a couple of weeks ago or months ago, and it's finished. But back then there were still 8 people living there, so we asked people to comment on their relationship with this town, and they wrote about that. And another project I did with a language center, indigenous language center in the Pilbara, was about the referendum, 67 referendum, and people commenting on the referendum and their opinion on it and thoughts. And so these are side projects of that original project where I let people do whatever they want with the negative. So there's certain different side series of that as well.
I think ethics in the realms of photography is something that most photographers will grapple with at some point. Do you feel like this process was born out of an ethical concern, or not?
Initially, I just wanted to not, like, even the term, I take somebody's photograph, so it's very passive for the person being photographed, or the sitter. So they're sitting there and getting their photo taken. but I wanted to get people involved in the image making process. That was the initial thing, and I was intrigued what they do. So they see their image and then they're reacting to that, and that was the initial thing in like when I started that in the 90s. And I mean, it's also a bit of ownership and agency in the process, so where they have agency in the image because they own half of it or they created half of it, So
Yeah,
it's a
there seems
collaboration.
to be a
yeah.
beautiful balance between the photographer yourself and the subject.
Yeah, and I think you learn more about the subject or the person through the sharing of the image making. So it's not just your view on them, but it's also their view on themselves and on the project and whatever they want to say or do. This is Kumpaya Gegiba, a Madu Mili artist. So that's when I started doing some work in the Pilbara. I collaborated with Madu artists, and they did their etchings in the emulsion, and these are all water holes in the Western Desert.
It's such beautiful work. If you get the chance to look through the whole series, is this on? I'm curious about the first image that we just spoke about. Was
Yep.
that somebody that, because I'm just curious about how you approach taking portraits in the terms of being an insider and an outsider? Or was that somebody, the person that you took in the first image, is that somebody that you knew well?
That was Matthew Griffin. He's an artist, and he used to be my housemate at the time.
Right.
So I think I knew him fairly well then, yeah.
And-
I still know him, but yeah, we were living together in a share house.
And say, as opposed to, were you commissioned to do this work, or did you personally know this? Was this a personal project, or was this a commissioned piece?
It was a project. I got to know the lady who ran the art center, and then we did this project. Basically, they could use the images for their artist profiles, and some were exhibited with their work. And so commission, I don't know, like it's more like a collaboration. Yeah.
Collaboration. Do you have any thoughts on how you approach or the differences between working with people that you are comfortable with and know well, like somebody who is part of your life, and then somebody who is a complete stranger? Can you kind of talk a little bit about the differences of that and how you approach both of those? Or is it the same?
It's very not the same, but I still don't know exactly what they're doing. Just because you know somebody, the outcome is always quite intriguing. Like even my brother did a Polaroid, and I didn't know what he's going to come up with, and he came up with something I didn't expect. So he was commenting on a radio station not playing a certain song because he loved that band, but they didn't play that band, and he was upset about that, and he wrote that about in his statement, and I would have never thought about that. Like I thought he comes up with something personal. It obviously was personal as well, because that was at that time that was in his mind, and he wanted to get it out there, And probably if I would do that, if he would do another one, he would come up with something totally different now, because he's a different stage of his life. But
do you feel more comfortable taking photos of strangers? Or do you feel more comfortable taking photos of people that you?
Don't know. Like, it's both got its pros and cons, I guess. But I always like if I like taking these portraits of people I know, because it's more like this visual diary sort of thing. So because in that, like, he used to live with us, and I really enjoyed them living with us. And I love his art as well. So I like looking at this image of him and his self-portrait, because I think he's a great artist, and he did a really nice piece there. And it reminds me of the time when we lived together, So that's more like a personal thing. Kumpaya's image is beautiful as well. I love it as well. But obviously it came together very differently, But then I think about the trip going up to Bangalore in the middle of the Western Desert, and there was this artist camp where they produced all the Madhumali artists came together from different communities and doing art together. And so it reminds me a bit of that, and I documented that as well, but and did the Polaroids at the same time there. So, but I can't say it's easier or harder to take a portrait. Sometimes it's harder to take a portrait of somebody you actually know. So I find it much harder to take a photo of my son than of a stranger. Because he's refusing to do it now.
This portrait, are we?
You guys just keep doing what you're doing.
Okay. I thought we were going one image, but no, that's okay. That's all right. It's fine. It's all going to pan out the same. This image is, I'm sure most people know this man, Archie Roach, who sadly passed away recently. I chose this image originally because the words that he had written beside his portrait, I found, just made me so emotional. It's such a beautiful image and beautiful words accompanying. But then later when I was looking at the image, I was curious about how we view portraits of people after they have passed away, and how the value of these images and how we memorialize people with the use of photography. It just feels like the photos kind of take on a new meaning after people have passed away. Did you feel like that about this particular image? And also just maybe just talk a little bit about your experience with photographing people who have since passed, and also because you've worked a lot in Indigenous communities, maybe just touch a little bit about the kind of protocols that happen with images of people who have passed.
Okay, yeah. Maybe just a bit about the background, how this image came together. So I did this project with the Language Centre in the Pilbara, and then the Museum of Australian Democracy in Canberra exhibited the work. And there I met Archie Roach because he was performing there. And I had the camera with me, the large format, and I took his portrait, and Ruby Hunter as well at the same time. She was still alive then as well. And half a year later, he did the etching. So because it was pretty rushed, everything. So I took the background portrait negative, but I caught up with him later on Lygon Street in a cafe, and then because we expanded the exhibition about the referendum to other topics as well, and one topic was art and music, and so I actually asked him to comment on music and what it means to him, and so that's how this image came about, and he used it in his book, in his biography, and coming to a person who pass away. So there's different. It always depends on the family, you know. So some people or some families actually. I was asked a few times to provide images for the funeral. So where the images of the person being passed away were put on the coffin, or in that little leaflet which comes with the funeral. That happens, but then traditionally you had to. You can't look at the image. So it depends what the family wants, basically. Like his family allowed images to be published after he passed away. So it's always different, and you always have to check in with people, basically. That's with the images I do. I always try to. I don't ask people for release forms or things like that. I talk to them, and then if I want to exhibit it or publish it, I try to contact them, you know, which sometimes doesn't work, but most of the time it's possible. And then because things change, you know, and people after 10 years, they might not want the image being published, or the family of the deceased doesn't want it to be published, or they're happy about it, so you always have to check in with it. So there is no blanket rule, you can't do this or you can do this, you have to check with the individuals, it's like personal preference for everybody, basically. And about the worth, I don't know, like I'm really happy that we took the photo, and it reminds me again of that time and of him and of his music at the time, and it's a beautiful memory for me, So there's another image of Daisy Cadable, who walked the rabbit-proof fence as a little girl, and that sort of has got a bit of a more momentum, and after she passed away, it was published in the New York Times, and sort of became a very prominent image after she passed away.
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't give it much thought, but just kind of ruminating over this question, and I realised so many times I'm taking photos, probably more so of my kids and my family, and I've always got in the back of my mind that I'm memorialising people and moments and hoping to capture things to kind of exist when my kids grow up and when I'm no longer here and that type of thing. It's just a kind of a thing that I think we subconsciously do, and we have this kind of importance on these images and how kind of crucial they are when you lose someone, or when you're facing mortality or your own mortality and things like that. It's like photography has such a kind of important place in death.
Oh, well, I did one of my father 3 months before he passed away, and he was commenting on his life and everything, and I'm really happy that I took that as well, because it's hanging. That image hangs in our doorway, hallway, so I walk past it every day, and sometimes I look at it, So it stays with you, And I think as a photographer, you sort of deep down want to leave something behind, I mean, everybody wants that, I guess, leave something behind, and even if it's just a few images. But yeah, so this is sort of they're sort of memories, visual memories, which you might have in your head, but these ones are on paper.
This is your Polaroid series. I'd love you to just kind of share a little bit.
It's basically so this is the positive of a Polaroid 665. So the Polaroid 665 comes with a positive and a negative. This image of Mary Dapalani from Ramin Ginning, I was up there for the National Gallery, taking photos of the weavers, and they did a collaboration with some designers from Spain. And so I started doing because the good thing about the Polaroid 665 is that you actually take the portrait and can give a portrait straight away to the person, so they have something in return straight away. That's what I like about this film as well, so that I keep the negative, but I can give the positive straight away to the person. And I started taking this series where people hold their own image. So you see the hands are really interesting as well, and they tell a bit of a story about a person as well. In combination with the print and the way they hold it, the way their hands look, and Mary, for example, she's a weaver, but being a weaver, that means she has to go out there, collect the bandanas, and they have really fierce spikes, so it's really hard, and they're digging for the roots to dye the bandana is it fabric? No, fiber. And so they are really hardworking, and then they do this delicate weaving work, So I think hands of artists, hands of craftspeople, they look quite interesting. Or hands of any, like if somebody works in the office on the laptop all day, they have very beautiful hands as well. So you can see a bit about what this hand does and how they, hold their own image. So I found that quite interesting as well. This is again like a little side series from that main series where people do the writing and everything.
Yeah, I think looking through, like maybe not so evident just looking at, even though it's a beautiful image, just looking at the one, but looking at the series from all of them together, it's actually quite fascinating how much of somebody's personality you can see through their gestures in their hands, and not even just their personality, but also their reaction to the photo that they're holding. It's very bizarre. I was pretty blown away by all of them like together, and how much you could actually kind of tell from the hand gestures. It's beautiful.
So now we're coming to the Quarry series. Yeah, can you tell us a bit, how did you start that? What intrigued you about this place and the people occupying it? Where is it?
Yeah, so recently I've moved. I was living in Melbourne for 12 years, but recently moved back to my hometown in Lismore in New South Wales. And I originally was kind of going to the quarry. It's the Bexhill Quarry, which is about 10 minutes outside of Lismore. And I originally was going there to kind of location scout for my In Australia series, which was the series that we saw before. And I just thought it might be a good location. And so I kind of, every time I had to drive past there to drop my daughter off at preschool, I'd just kind of go in and take photos and, you know, take location photos and just kind of like come up with a plan of what I wanted to do there. And every time I went there, you kind of walk up this narrow little road, and then you come to this just kind of serene aqua, like it was an old brickworks quarry, which I think closed in about 1998. But now it's just these amazing kind of like cliffs of a quarry, and then this aqua water, and it's become quite a popular swimming spot for the locals. And then as I've kind of discovered, people come near and far to kind of visit it, and it's kind of getting a little bit of getting known. And I think the jury's still out on whether it's safe to swim in or not, but a lot of people don't seem to care. So yeah, I was just kind of going there, originally scouting for another series, and then every time I went there, I kind of walk up the road, and there was like a, you know, P-platers there, like in trucks. And then I'd go another time, and there was a little boy there with his kitten. And then I'd go another time, and there were paramedics standing on the side of the water. And then it was just like after a few scenarios like that, where I was like, oh, maybe there's actually something in this place that kind of lends itself to something separate to my original body of work. So I just started kind of going there as often as I could, and I think when I just decided that maybe there was something in there that I wanted to keep visiting, it was just then I think the flood hit in Lismore, and we got a really insane rain period, and obviously no one was going to the quarry and swimming, but I kept going there, and I just started noticing, you know, just all these things that I would probably never even think about. And, you know, the road that you walk in had been completely washed away by the flood, and I just started documenting it without people. And I continued to do that all through winter, and then I was just noticing it was like this kind of meditation on a site, and just kind of becoming hyper aware of like the ecosystems and the seasonal changes and the environmental changes, and then also like human behaviour again when people started coming back there again. So it's just become really fascinating for me, and also like a very different way of working, because I think the In Australia series was so kind of involved in the pre-production side of things and constructing these things, and so much going into kind of making this scene, whereas embarking on a body of work that it was very observational and just available to me whenever I wanted it. It just became exciting and just a really new way of working. So yeah, I've continued to just go there, and every time I go there, I'm like, just, yeah, I don't know. It's like this. It's like just having this backdrop, and then all the things that are existing and changing, and I don't think we realise how much things are just like living and dying and blooming and changing, and it's in one particular space because we're so used to just passing through, or so it's just been, yeah, it's been a kind of satisfying project to kind of embark on, and a freeing one. It feels freeing after.
So you don't have to prepare people and locations and everything, so because everything's there, and is it purely documentary, or are you talking to the people and saying, hey, I'm doing this, and or how do you make it work? How do you like, when I look at these images, that's when I'm interested in seeing how does it how do you get these images?
Yeah, well, it's been a process because it's the first time that I've worked in a way where I'm approaching strangers and asking to take their photos. So it's been a different way of working and a huge learning curve. And I think this image here was when I did end up taking portraits of these people, but it was still, obviously, but I think I was still kind of unsure about how to take just a portrait of their face, so I was kind of like using this long lens and like kind of stalking people because I was too scared to like approach them, and what if they say no, and even if they say yes, how do I get them to
that's
relax?
They're the sort of questions, that's I'm asking myself, like I mean, on the one hand it's documentary, but you don't want to be sort of the person in the bush with a long lens,
No, I know. I've kind of done away with that, and I'm getting braver, but I think it's a territorial thing as well. Like I felt new to the area again. I'm an insider to an extent that it's my hometown, and I'm an outsider to an extent that I haven't lived there for so long, and I felt disconnected from the community and from these teenagers that I left the town when I was 18. And I'm coming back as a adult and a mother, and then I'm kind of like, my subjects are the people that I was when I left. And so I think, but as time has gone on, I kind of feel like I have something to say now. Like when I'm approaching people, I'm like, I've been working, I've been taking photos and returning to the quarry for the last year now. I'm building up a body of work. Do you want, and I feel like there's a little bit more like on my side.
And like when are there people, does it happen that you go there and people are there who know that you take photos and that it's sort of okay, like it's sort of agreed?
It's only recently, like I think last week, that I went there and I saw the same people that I'd photographed before, and every single time I've gone there, it's just been a new people, and now I'm starting to see, I think because it's been really hot and people are going there all the time, that now I'm kind of, I don't know whether that's a blessing or a curse, but it's they kind of knew me, and they let me take portraits of them again, and I think. I guess it was kind of relaxing in a way.
Because I think then it will get easier and maybe even better if you don't have to introduce yourself. Like if it's sort of if you become part of the fabric, or
Yeah, I just don't want to be like, oh God, here's that girl's here again. We just want to swim. What's she doing? Like I don't want to be like the quarry stalker, but I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying to like fit in with the,
And do you show them images, or how does it?
Yeah, I've you know, my kind of like giving back of like, you know, taking their portrait is I'm like, I'll get your details and I'll send you some photos,
Yeah,
and
that's nice.
people seem very happy with that. Yeah.
And sometimes are there people who say actually no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm okay with that now.
Yeah,
It's like it's
but
not as scary as it was.
that can be a bit demoralizing as well sometimes, no? Like when people say
Yeah,
no.
especially when you see something in someone that you're like, oh no, please. Like the paramedics would not let me take photos of
Yeah,
them,
there
and
you
I
go.
was like, oh, are you sure? Just the back, but no. Yeah, it's just, and also I've started working. I mean, I'm not.
They probably extended the lunch break.
Yeah, I know. I was like, they probably shouldn't have been there, and that's why. But what was I going to say?
Sorry to interrupt.
It was something about camera that I was using. I can't remember.
What camera are you using?
Oh no, I was talking
Very
about
long one.
failure. I was talking about failure. Just the you know, when people say no, that can feel devastating. But also, I've started working with like film, like medium format film for this project, and I've had some crushing losses.
What happened?
Just a
Pull
new
the ducks
camera,
right.
just blurry images and you know, technical things that have gone wrong from, you know, and it's
The beauty of film
devastating every single time. But yeah, I'm in charge of this.
I'll just butt in as well, and I'll just say in the broadsheet that everybody's gotten when you come in, there's some really beautiful spreads there of both Tobias and Tajette's work, which might be a nice little reference as well.
Should I just skip this one? It's kind of the same kind of. Just what time? How are we going?
It's nearly 3.
Is this one of the more still images?
Sorry.
Is this one of the more still images? The one which were suggested to you? To have a bit more still, like calming images in between the portraits?
Oh no,
Quiet,
that was
Sorry,
a different series.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the In Australia series that I was talking about.
But I was wondering if you actually adapted that into the new one.
Oh right. No, I think I was just I was feeling a bit of grief about, you know, like I've just kind of got excited about this series of taking portraits of people at the quarry, and then all of a sudden it was floods, and then it was winter, and I just kept going there and just kind of documenting the landscape. And I mean, it's hard to talk about a body of work before you know what it's going to be and how it's going to end up. But yeah, I guess I'm just at a stage where I'm taking photos that interest me. I think one thing I will say though is that what I've noticed about working with in this way, kind of like just documenting a place and observing a place, is that there's been so many times, like I've driven past this little road that kind of goes in, and there's been so many, and you kind of feel when you're there that it's you're very kind of isolated and vulnerable, and you're kind of removed from the road. And it kind of really struck me. I think women in general kind of move through their life with you know, a feeling of unsafety in many kind of scenarios, and I've never really contributed that to my photography work. But it became really clear to me that there's so many times that I've just driven past because I'm like, there's only one car there, or, you know, like just feeling basically unsafe. And yeah, I think it's something that I don't want to generalize or assume, but I think maybe it's something that men don't have to deal with, of kind of feeling vulnerable doing documentary work. And I think since then I've kind of like I listened to a lot of podcasts on photography, the Sasha Wolf photography, and a lot of the talks, she's interviewing these male photographers, and they talk about just kind of getting in their cars and driving into towns and approaching people and things like that. And I was just like, yeah, women a lot of the time. I'm actually curious as to how many women have stopped themselves from kind of pursuing a shot, or, you know, not feeling kind of confident enough or safe enough to be able to kind of continue with a body of work, or continue with a photograph, or I'll just leave that one because I just don't really feel like it's a safe kind of scenario for me. I went to the quarry once, and it was just me. And I went there once actually when it was like full moon at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was feeling pretty unsure about doing it, but there was so much mist around, and I just thought it would be really kind of cool to kind of go in at that time, just as it was just getting light, and there's all this kind of mist on the quarry, and had my keys with me just in case, like I was like, but yeah, I brought that up. I taught a workshop, a couple of months later, and I brought it up with someone, and I was like, oh, I went there at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and she was just like, what? She was like, someone was raped there, like last year or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, I totally believe it. But I just thought it's something worth kind of talking about, because I've never kind of attributed women's safety to photography and documentary work.
Sort of moving towards the end of it, and I thank you both so much for giving that insight. And we're really familiar with both of your works, but learning something new every time, especially about the location scale. Like, I just didn't know that, and it makes so much sense when I look at that Australian series now. But I think like a really nice place to I guess kind of finish this chat would be to kind of bring it back to the awards a little bit, and having sat on the committee this year and having seen the work, and of course we're not allowed to talk about results. But I would love to hear a little from both of you about, what your experience was being on the other side of that, what you see, I guess, in terms of trends, how people are kind of excelling within their photography. If you're happy to go there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think I was really taken by the quality of the work. So it was, and I really liked the dialogue we had about portrait photography, and the discussions, about what is a good portrait and why, so because everybody has a different opinion, but I think we came to a good agreement in the end. Yeah, so I was honored to be on that panel, and it is interesting to see, because that was the first time I've judged a photography award, but I've many times entered them, But I assume that other awards are judged in a different way as well, Like once I was a finalist in the Canberra Portrait Prize, and was giving a talk there, and then in the discussion it was like, yeah, we they look at sometimes, we had this is a section of sort of portrait of middle-aged men or whatever, so we had a couple of them, that's why we didn't take that, But I disagree with that. Either it's a good image or it's not, and if it's two middle-aged women, or 3 or 4 or 5, doesn't matter. If it's good, So I wouldn't look at the numbers. I look at each image and see the merit there, So I don't believe in these categories too much, So that's just my personal opinion anyway.
Not so much on your behalf, but I think it's always really interesting trying to pull back a little bit of the curtain so people kind of get an idea of, you know, how it works behind the scenes, because it's so
it's
often
intriguing.
you know, you send an entry off and then you get a result
And you say, why didn't I get in that? when you see the shortlist, you know.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. I think it was the second time that I've kind of been asked to be a judge on the award, but this was a really kind of interactive, and I really enjoyed the discussions that we had about the work, and also the images that did kind of rise to the top. I feel like they were so strong and quite unanimous between all of us. So I think it was like, yeah, it was a pretty harmonious process, wasn't it? There was not too many arguments, or it got a little hairy towards the end, but we got through it.
should be a little bit difficult, I think.
Yeah.
There was a couple of back and forth, but yeah, no, it was great.
We might open it up to a few questions as well. I know we're running a little bit over, but I want to personally hear these guys continue to talk. So does anyone have any question? We'll just do a few.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes?
Hi. I was recently in the Tiwi Islands, my name's Hillary.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure of actually being on a cultural tour with a whole bunch of 15-year-old boys and girls from the local school. And I remember Hyder Smith going up there and doing her book and what have you. And in fact, the book is on display in the museum.
Yep, I got it given, yeah.
Yes, it's beautiful. I was also on the ferry with a German woman who has worked on the Tiwi Islands for 15 years as a social worker. And she sort of commented on people of you know, white people going into community and taking pictures. So I'm just sort of maybe following up on what you were saying about the sort of us and them sort of scenario. It can be difficult, and it's getting more difficult, and I think that how do you get over that? And because I was just listening to the photo ethics podcast about consent and stuff like that, so it was very interesting to hear that what you've been doing, and I've always loved the imagery, so it's very interesting to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always work with an organization. For example, when I was on the Tiwi Islands, it was through the National Gallery of Victoria, and then we went to all the art centers and took photos there. There was a book which came out with a TV exhibition at the National Gallery. So I always try to work with an organization, either an art center or a language center in communities. So you're not actually cold calling and coming in and start taking photos, sort of thing. So you get an introduction, and I also always try to give images back, or in an ideal scenario, go back as well. So, for example, with the Madu artist, I went there, I don't know, 5-6 times over the years, and always brought back images. And that's because people say, yeah, there's tourists coming in taking photos, and you never see them again, and they don't send any photos back. So what's the point getting my photo taken here? So because it's a one-way road. But I think if you make that an exchange, so first of all, with the Polaroids, you can always give one straight away, and that is a big benefit, and people enjoy that as well. And sometimes people, I did some Polaroids, and somebody came to me and said, "Can you take my photo?" Because then and then that photo won the Moran Photo Prize, because that person saw the way it this project works, and he wanted a portrait of himself, and that made the whole thing work. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have come over. It would have been a different camera or a different sort of scenario. So and to me, it doesn't really matter if it's an indigenous community or not. Like, I think if you take a portrait of somebody, it's fair enough to at least give them a copy.
And you go further than that, though. And maybe you don't kind of promote that, but having done the exhibition with you those years ago, and the way that you handle sales of your artwork.
Yeah. I mean, for example, when I won the Art Handlers Award in the National Portrait Prize, there was a cash prize of $2,000, and I shared the proceeds with Bobby Banninger in Remington, who is the person in the photograph.
Does anyone else?
Oh, hi. It's not really a question, but it was just an observation that I really liked when Tajette was asking you about if you prefer to take portraits of strangers or people that you know, and you just took it as you took it a different way. You took it as their input to your photograph, not what you. Yeah, anyway, yes. I just liked it.
But yeah, I'm really interested in that, what the people do in this.
More
So it's not just the portrait, it's this exchange or this reaction of the sitter or the person being photographed. I always like saying the person being photographed, not the sitter, or the subject is even worse, you know. Yeah, I'm always interested in that, you know, that makes it, for me, that is the interesting part. I mean, obviously you want to take a decent portrait as well, but that's only half the way, you know.
I've got a question, and I think it's a good last one. Yeah, Tajette, I guess like with the Quarry series and revisiting a place over and over, which is quite different from the Australian series, I imagine after a while you stop taking pictures of things that you've sort of photographed before and you've seen before. So as the project's continued and developed, what is it that keeps you going back and taking pictures?
I think, I thought that too. I thought, how long could tell me if I'm not getting the question right, but I did think that how long can I exhaust this place for? And I don't know if I've been there one time where I haven't seen something new or interesting, or this kind of place just keeps revealing itself, and whether it's the environment or the people who are there or whatever, I don't know when I don't know if I feel like I'm going and photographing the same thing over and over. It doesn't. At this point in time, everything feels, every time I walk in there, it feels like a whole new scene.
I've got the alarm going off, so that's good one, Dad. Yeah, just a huge thank you to both of you for just being so generous with your time, and also for coming here and sitting with us in this strange place on this little stage, and being so open and willing. So yeah, please, ladies and gentlemen, just one more time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom and Harriet,
Thanks
for having us, and Gussie for all the behind the scenes
Making us look
work.
good.
Say as well that I just want to thank you for the judging process and your enthusiasm and your honesty and your commitment to that process as well. It's really important for us to be working with people in this situation where we're really doing the best by the people that are entering our awards as well. And these guys were just incredible and took every single entry with as much consideration as they could. So yeah,